All right, let's jump right into one of the most incredible chapters in the Bible. Today, we're unpacking Exodus 16. And believe me, this story is so much more than just food falling from the sky. It's really a deep dive into God's incredible faithfulness and our own, often messy journey of learning to trust Him, not just for the big miracles, but for our daily needs.
I want you to really try and put yourself in their shoes for a second. Imagine it. You've just seen the plagues in Egypt, you've walked through the Red Sea on dry land, and you watched as your enemies were completely wiped out. The feeling must have been absolutely electric. But that big dramatic moment is over. You're free, yes, but you're also standing in the middle of a vast, empty desert, and that huge question just hangs in the air. Now what?
And you know that now what question gets answered pretty quick, and not in a good way. It's only been a month since they left Egypt, and they found themselves in the wilderness of Sin, a totally barren place between the last oasis they saw and Mount Sinai up ahead. That initial celebration feels like a lifetime ago, and a brand new, very real crisis is starting to bubble up.
And this is where that raw human nature just takes over, right? Their stomachs are empty, the future is uncertain, and that fear quickly turns into frustration, and that frustration spills out into complaining. And notice, it wasn't just a few disgruntled people whispering in the back. The Bible says the whole congregation started murmuring. This was a full-blown collective crisis of faith.
It's just amazing how quickly their perspective gets twisted, isn't it? Look at this contrast. On one side, you have this romanticized memory of Egypt. Suddenly, they're remembering slavery as this time they sat by pots of meat and ate all the bread they wanted. And that fantasy is completely at odds with their terrifying new reality. The very real fear that they're all going to starve to death out here in the middle of nowhere.
And this quote, wow, it just lays bare how deep their despair was. I mean, just think about what they are saying. They're saying it would have been better to die as slaves back in Egypt than to face this challenge as free people. Their fear of hunger had completely erased the miracle of their freedom. It's just a gut-wrenching thing to say.
But here's the beautiful part. God's response isn't what you might expect. It's not a lightning bolt of anger for their lack of faith. Instead, He sees their crisis as the perfect opportunity to show them who He is, to reveal His glory and His character as a faithful provider. He meets their desperate cries not with punishment, but with a promise. So God tells Moses and Aaron, "I have heard them." And He points out something really important. He says their complaining isn't really about Moses and Aaron. They're murmuring against the Lord Himself. But even knowing that, His response is just pure grace. He's about to answer them in a way they could never have imagined.
And God's promise is so specific. It's a two-parter. First, He says, you'll get meat tonight. Then, in the morning, you'll have all the bread you can eat. But notice that last part. That's the whole point. He's not just filling their stomachs. The goal is, then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. This whole thing is about building a real relationship of trust.
And of course, God is as good as His word. That very same evening, a huge flock of quail flies in and literally covers the camp. Just like that, their immediate need for meat is met. It's an instant, undeniable miracle.
But then the morning comes, and this is where things get even more mysterious. After the morning dew evaporates, the Israelites wake up, and the ground is covered with something they've never seen before. The Bible describes it as a fine, flake-like thing, a small, round thing on the ground. The mystery of God's provision just gets deeper.
And you can just imagine their faces. Their reaction is perfectly captured in the name they give it. They looked at each other and said, Manhu, which literally means in Hebrew, what is it? And that's the name that stuck, manna, a name that was born from pure, unfiltered astonishment at what God was doing.
Okay, so this miracle food shows up, but it wasn't a free-for-all. It actually came with a very clear set of instructions. See, God wasn't just trying to show them that He could provide. He was teaching them how to live in a state of daily dependence on Him.
The rules were pretty simple and so profound. First, only gather enough for one day for each person. Second, don't try to hoard it or save it overnight. Third, on the day before the Sabbath, gather twice as much. And fourth, trust that the provision will last through the Sabbath, a day where you are commanded to do no work, but to rest in Him.
And this is just brilliant, because the consequences were immediate. The people who listened and trusted God had exactly what they needed, no more, no less. But of course, some people, probably driven by that same old fear, tried to hoard it. They gathered extra and tried to save it. And what happened? It was filled with worms and it stank. It was this very real, tangible daily lesson. Trust me for today. I'll be here for you again tomorrow.
You know, this is one of the first times we see the Sabbath command laid out so clearly. God is literally weaving the principle of rest into the very fabric of their survival. The fact that the double portion of manna on day 6 didn't spoil was its own weekly miracle, proving that God would sustain them even in their rest.
Now, this whole amazing daily miracle wasn't just for the people who were physically there in the wilderness. God intended for this lesson, this powerful demonstration of His faithfulness, to be remembered forever. He wanted it to become a memorial for all the generations to come.
The Bible even gives us these wonderful sensory details. It looked like a small white seed, like coriander. And the taste? It tasted like wafers made with honey. This wasn't just some bland survival food. It was a sweet gift from God, a tangible expression of His loving care that they could see and touch and taste every single day.
And to make absolutely sure this lesson was never, ever forgotten, God gave a specific command. Aaron was told to take a golden pot, fill it with 1 day's portion of manna, and place it before the Lord. This pot would eventually be placed inside the Ark of the Covenant itself as a permanent reminder, a testimony that says this is how our God provides for His people.
And let's just let this number sink in for a second. 40. This wasn't a short-term emergency ration. For 40 years, an entire generation grew up on this stuff. God sustained a whole nation in the desert with bread from heaven, every single morning except for the Sabbath, for 40 years. The scale of that consistent, daily, never-failing faithfulness is it's staggering to think about.
So that's where we'll leave it. The story of manna is an amazing historical account of God providing for Israel, but the principle behind it is absolutely timeless. It challenges us to look at our own lives and ask, what is the daily bread that I need from God today? Maybe it's financial provision, maybe it's strength or patience or wisdom for a tough situation. Whatever it is, Exodus 16 is this powerful, beautiful reminder to trust God for what we need today and to have faith that He'll be there to provide all over again tomorrow.